Welcome to an episode of Mr. P Does It. Today we're going to be making this nice little wood box. What's great about this wood box is we can get most of the pieces out of just one board. Every piece except the lid is going to come from this board right over here. This board needs to be rough cut to 34 inches long. I'll show you how to cut it into pieces later in this video. It needs to be 5.5 inches wide. So if you don't know how to make a board to a certain distance width, I have a separate video for that. It's how to use a jointer and a table saw to make a board a certain width. But this one we made 5.5, again 34 inches rough cut, and then we have the thickness is 3/4 of an inch. Now this board here is slightly over 3/4 of an inch, so we have to run it through this planer. That's where we're going to start before we start the measuring. So this is the planer. We just got the blades on top of the planer. We're going to run it through. It should just be one pass just to knock it down to 3/4. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the exhaust fan, suck up the sawdust, put on my safety protection, fire up the machine, send it through. Now that the board is 3/4 of an inch, we can take it over to the table and start measuring the base and the four sides, and then we're going to be taking it over to the miter saw to cut. This is a great intro project to woodworking, and it's always nice to have an end result with something that you can use. Let's go do some measuring. All right, let's do some layout. So I have a board that is 34 inches long. On each end is a rough cut end. So I need to cut that off. I'm gonna start using a speed square, and I'm gonna measure over a 1/2 inch, and I'm gonna use the speed square and just draw a nice line down. So that is gonna be cut off with a miter saw. I'm just gonna go ahead and scribble that out. And our first measurement is going to be 5.5. So this is gonna be your base. So I'm gonna start right on the line, and if you want to use a ruler you can do that, but I have 5.5 here. Put a little line, and then I'm going to take the tri-square, I'm going to zip a line down. Now we have to have waist side on the line, so we're going to line up this board and do a 1/2 inch gap, and we're going to scribble that in. Now the reason I put that there is when we go to cut on the saw, we have to line it up on that side of the line, so there has to be a little bit of a waste in between your cuts. So I'm just doing a 1/2 inch, and now we need four sides that are 6 1/4. So we have 6 1/4. Again, you can use a ruler. I'm just using the speed square, drawing a line down, and then doing that 1/2 inch gap. So we need four sides and one base. This is side 1, and I'm just gonna speed this up and make 4 other sides, and then we can start cutting. So 6 1/4 is gonna be that measurement for each side with a 1/2 inch waist side gap in between each one. And then whatever you have at the end, you can just scribble off. So I'm gonna speed this up. All right, all the sides are laid out. Again, 5.5, 6 1/4, 6 1/4, 6 1/4, 6 1/4, 1/2 inch gap in between each one. And now it's time to go bring it over to the miter saw and make these cuts, and then we'll assemble after that. All right, here we are at the miter saw. Everything is laid out now. We have our base and 4 sides. What we're gonna do is cut one at a time, and we're just gonna line up the saw blade on the side of the line that we scribbled out. So I'm just gonna start here at the base. I'm gonna work my way down. Make sure you keep your fingers around 4 inches away when possible. I'm just gonna turn on the exhaust fan and we're gonna get into this. one beginning. And we're just gonna go down the line. So this would be the base. I would just stack it there and just go down, and I'll fast forward this, but don't forget you gotta cut off each scribbly 1/2 inch waist side. Okay, so we got the base and then the 4 sides. Take your time when you're doing this, because when we make a wood box, everything has to be square, lined up, and even. Yes, we do have some room for sanding, but the better you cut here, the less work you gotta do later. All right, the next stage is gonna be assembling this. Let's go over there and show you how to do that. All right, now that we have all our pieces cut, what we wanna do here is just dry fit it. So before we start applying any glue, I just wanna see how this all lines up to see if things are fitting well. As you can see here, there is a gap right there. What happened, I believe, is that this space got cut a little bit too long. And yes, it's about an 1/8 of an inch too big. So what I'm gonna do is mark it to where it should be. Remember, that's 5.5. I'm gonna go cut a little bit off of that. It's always good to be a little over than under. So I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go make this cut and then we'll continue on with the assembly. All right, we're back. And the first thing I'm gonna do before I start putting things together is all the writing should be on the outside of the box if you did label anything, so that we can sand that off. So I'm gonna start tipping this up and just doing one more dry fit. So here, there, and here. Yeah, that's a lot better. And there might be a little, gaps here and there, or overhangs, but that's what the sander's for. Or we can use some wood putty. But now I'm gonna put everything down. Remember, the grain here needs to be all, I guess you could say, horizontal. You should not have the boards tipped up like that. All right, I got the glue, and I'm just gonna start on this board that's closest to me. I'm gonna apply a bead of glue down, and that's gonna go up against the bottom, the base, but I know something's gonna be hitting on this side. So I'm gonna just apply about that much glue, and I'm gonna tip that up, line things up, and now that is gonna go up against that glue, but I need glue on the bottom. So I'm gonna put a bead of glue down, and that's gonna stand up. This one, you just gotta do a little bit of thinking. Always the bottom, we know that for sure. And then this one's gonna get some on the side. So there's no right way to do this. It's just any wood surface that's gonna be touching another wood surface needs to be glued. So yeah, it might be a little bit of a puzzle. There might be a better way to do this, but I found that this works. This is the most complicated one. The last one I got an L on the face, and then on the end grain, I have a bead there. So that's just gonna stand up. So everything is glued. So any wood that's touching another wood is glued. And what I'm kind of doing right now is just kind of situating everything, kind of moving the boards around so that glue gets smeared in there. And we can always fine tune it later. Next, what you're gonna need is a quick clamp. And we're just gonna clamp this together slowly. So as I'm clamping this, I'm kind of moving things around. All right. Now it's nice to have another clamp, but right now I have this side right here, this edge of the board is perfectly lined up with this board right here. So that's a good lineup. When I have a good lineup, I am going to capitalize on that. And I'm just gonna shoot a temporary, it's a permanent nail, but this is not gonna, I would definitely wait for the glue to dry before you start handling this too roughly, because the glue is gonna be your main strength. But this is just a brad nailer. What we're gonna do is just push it up against that and shoot a nail into it in the upper right-hand corner. Make sure you're always holding that nailer straight. And we can kind of just go around now and make sure you're lined up and shoot that top nail in. There we go, got that one. Always make sure your fingers are not in line with that nailer, because you may think you're in straight, but you just never know. All right, so now we got to do the bottoms, and this is where I do kind of like getting 2 clamps on, and I'm just again lining things up and clamping it together. What we can kind of do here is just take the nailer, and again, you can do this with 1 clamp, but to start off with 1 or 2 might be nice, especially if you have to manipulate the board a little bit. So I'm going to shoot one right in the middle of the base on one of my sides here. I'm going to remove that, and I'm just going to get one in the corner. I'm going to turn it. I'm just kind of going to go around and look for gaps. Like there's a gap right here. I'm going to take this clamp and see if I can close that gap a little bit. All right, I'll go in the corner. A little bit of wood putty might be nice there. And then you can also come from the top, but you gotta be careful not to shift anything. We're gonna go in right here. And then I see there's a gap inside here. This side needs to get pulled in a little bit. Actually, this is working really nice. And I need to hold this in. I'm gonna shoot one in the middle. Depending on what your box does, you might need to shoot nails into different spots. I had a gap right here, so I put a clamp here. I'm gonna shoot a nail here now. Basically, you're just trying to get this box to come together the tightest way possible. You're doing that with clamps and glue, and you might again need to fill some things in. Sometimes what I like to do is take the glue. If I see just a little gap, I just take some glue and I just kind of rub it into the gaps. Now, if you have a significant gap, that's not going to work. But I have nails now all the way around. I'll show you how to get rid of those nail holes with some putty later. But for now, our box it's still going to be wet from the glue, but it's together, it's square, and the next part is going to be sanding this thing up. Let's go to the next step. Now that everything's glued up with the box, it's time to start sanding it. And if you have any wet glue at this point, I would wipe it off just so that it doesn't cake up your sanding pad. What I have here is a cordless sander, rigid, powered by a battery. I'm just gonna go ahead and run it first on the glue areas, trying to get all the glue off, pencil lines, etc. And from there, we're gonna show you how to wood stamp your name into it so you can claim it as yours. But right now, let's get this sanding done. I'm also going to take down the sharp corners, making sure that it feels good on the hands everywhere. So let's go ahead and just begin sanding the glue and the pencil lines off, and we'll go from there. Another thing that you should sand down until it becomes flat is these ends. So if you are feeling a little lip right here, that means that it's not flush. So sand that down until everything's nice and flat. That goes for the bottom as well if there was any mistakes with the gluing process. At this point, you can also take wood putty and cram it into those nail holes that'll hide it. Try to match up a wood putty that matches with the wood that you're using. Or you can take a little bit of glue and some of the sawdust from these bags, and you can kind of make a little homemade putty to kind of conceal any holes, or if you even have some lines. So I'm gonna fast forward this video. The next stage will be those wood stamps. All right, it's always nice to be able to label your project. I have some name stamps here today, but you could wood burn it, etch it. I mean, I guess you could simply just write on it with a permanent marker, but on this bottom edge is always nice to label. So I have a letter P here, letter stamp. I'm just gonna put it upside down and just gonna label my box here. So you should definitely do that before or after sanding. And we're gonna be moving on to the lid next. So we're gonna have to make a lid that fits the top of this box, and we're gonna have to use the jointer and the table saw again, because this board on top is not 5.5 inches in width. So once you're sanded, your name is on it, you're ready to move on to the lid, and that is gonna be on the next demo. All right, now it's time to make the lid for the box. Grab yourself a ruler and just double check the top dimensions of your box. I'm slightly under 7 and just about 7. So I think what I can do is just cut a 7x7 square and start there, and then I can always make some modifications and adjustments once I make that cut. You do need to find a board that is at least a little over 7 inches wide, and then run it in the jointer unless you have that board already made in your shop. So I'm gonna go ahead and make myself a 7x7 lid using the steps that you did to make this original box. All right, I made the lid for the box. Found a cool piece of wood that's got some brown running through it. This is gonna be the top because it doesn't have that brown. I wanna show that brown. So we're gonna run it on the router here. And anytime you're using the router, at least on a router table like this, with a bit that's gonna give it a decorative edge, the good side always goes down. You also wanna do the end grain first, just in case you have some chip out. So I'm gonna go ahead and run my 2 ends, then I'll turn it and do my 2 edges. So we're gonna turn it on and run this. All right, this looks beautiful. From this point, I would just do some sanding. It does make some marks and stuff, so I would just run it over with an orbital sander front and back. And I would also probably put some type of label on here with your name on it, so stamping your name in it or wood burning it, whatever, that works. But yeah, we're ready at this point. If everything's sanded and ready to go, I would just take the air, like some compressed air or some type of way to get the sawdust off, and then we're gonna start staining that. So that'll be the next stage. So I'll meet you over there. All right, we're ready to stain. And as I'm putting on my gloves here, just wanna say there's no real rush to get to this stage. Anytime you're doing woodworking or any type of project, taking your time, making sure that the quality is done right. Sanding is just so big when it comes to woodworking projects. It really makes the projects look a lot nicer, feel nicer, etc. So Let's move on to staining though. What I have here is some newspaper laid down. I got 2 sticks that's propping it up off the newspaper, so when it's time to dry, it's not going to stick to anything. So I just have a bristle brush, but you can use like an old rag or whatever. So I'm just gonna use this. And I'm using Minwax, so this is a very standard woodworking stain. And what you're gonna wanna do is tip your project upside down, starting on the bottom, not only on the box, but also on the lid. Always go in the direction of the wood grain. So we have a vertical, I guess, wood grain. And just simply going back and forth. This would be a good chance to put on like a smock of some sort or a shop coat. And you're just gonna go ahead and go back and forth and stain up your project and make sure to get every square inch. And with stain, it's always probably best to do 2 coats. So I'll be staining and taking a break from this process, and we'll be coming back then. And it's gonna be time to put on the hinges. Before I go though, talking about the process of this staining is everything's upside down. So I would do the bottom, do the sides, do the bottom of the lid, and then I'm gonna eventually turn that lid. And so when it dries on these sticks, it's gonna make some marks. Well, I want those marks to be underneath the lid, not on top of my box. So that's why I always start upside down first and then flip and let dry. So that's a good habit to get into, especially if you're using these sticks. Okay, so I need some time to stain. I'll catch you guys on the next portion, which is gonna be hinges, and we'll talk about where I get those and how to do it. All right, we're back and it's time to put on the hinges. So the first thing I'm gonna do with this is determine like what side is the front of my box. And really the way I determine that is just putting it upright like this and taking your fingers and just feeling to see which is gonna be the flattest, like flush. So if this is the back of my project, the hinges would go here and here, and it's nice and flat there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pick that one. You're gonna need a clamp so that doesn't do that. So we're gonna hold it upright like this, and you're just going to quick clamp that together so that it doesn't move on you. That's all you really need to do. You don't have to really crank on that. And then at this point, you just need 2 hinges. Now these are small hinges I get from Amazon. Okay, so we got 1 hinge and the second hinge. All right, so the hinge part where it bends needs to go on the crack, like that and like that. And I get these hinges, like I said, from Amazon. They're just small, but you can use any hinge as long as it's not oversized and like passing the top of your project. It'll look pretty normal. Now, what we're gonna do is measure about 1 inch in, or you can kind of guesstimate 1 inch, just so that they're about the same on each side. From the side, you're gonna come in about 1 inch. So I'm just gonna hold it in place. And this is pine. Again, this is a softwood. So I'm gonna take this awl. I'm just gonna push a starter hole on the tops and the bottom. I'm gonna just start with the top. I'm gonna grab myself some little screws. And with these little screws, you need a screwdriver that is appropriate for this small of a screw. So not any screwdriver is gonna work. It needs to fit in there nice and snug like this. And you're gonna hold it upright like this, just keeping everything nice and straight. You're gonna righty-tighty, twist it to the right and just push in and get that hinge to stay in place. Now I push that hole in there first so that it's easier for us to start the screws. Okay, so you don't have to keep twisting it. Just once it's snugged up and flush, that means it's good enough. You're gonna do that on the 2 bottom ones here, and then you will place this hinge on this side at about the same distance off the side. I'm gonna fast forward this. We'll take a look at what the finished product looks like. All right, we are done with the hinges, and this is what it's gonna look like. We have a hinge on each side, we got all 4 screws in, and it is functional. So this looks great. We have a finished product here. We went from start to finish on this project. The next thing you could do at this point is, if you don't trust these hinges, it depends on what type of hinges that you buy, but if you don't want that applied stress on those hinges, you can support it with a device like this right here. So if you took some eye hooks, you could stretch a chain from the inside of the box to the top of the lid. So when you open the box, the chain is taking the brunt of that force and not the hinges. But after that, there's some other things you can do, like put a clear coat on top of your box. I highly recommend putting a type of protection over the top of it, as far as like a clear coat. So varnish, you could do an aerosol varnish. There's a couple different options that you have for that. But that's all for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching and learning with Mr. P Does It. Have a great day. Thanks.